Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong, appears to laugh at a question about UFOs. A secret salvage operation of an aircraft carrier-sized UFO that was brought down during the 1962 nuclear weapons test called Blue Gill Triple Prime. Newly released JFK assassination documents show a connection between a CIA officer specializing in psychological warfare and Lee Harvey Oswald. More information about the interstellar object 31 Atlas, which has been estimated to be as big as 12 miles in length. It will pass close to Mars but miss the Earth by 2 astronomical units. Ross Coulthart is correct that Lockheed Martin built the Tic Tac craft that were filmed and tracked by the US Navy in 2004. A size comparison of unclassified space stations. These stories and more on Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome, it's July 12, and I am covering quite a few stories in today's edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. So I want to begin with this story concerning the Minister for Foreign Affairs in Australia being asked a question about UFOs, and she appeared to laugh. So let's just play the clip so you can see exactly what happened.
Are you aware of reports? I did raise this with the previous Air Marshal as well, of US military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
just so I'm clear,
unidentified aerial phenomena. Or do you think it's funny?
My biggest fear in all this, frankly, and I'm not, ruling anything out, obviously, but my biggest fear is that some adversary has made a technological leap. That would be really bad news, and that we have been caught, flat-footed on it. So we're taking it seriously. It's bipartisan. Everyone's working on it. But look, this is a tough thing to dig into. There's a stigma associated with it, right? I mean, nobody wants to be known as the UFO guy, but these are things that are important for us to understand.
Okay, so that was a tweet by Grant Levac, who is a Australian UFO researcher, and he just wanted to point out the contrast here, really, between Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong, who just appears to be so completely uninformed about UFOs that she kind of like giggles at a question about it, as opposed to her peer, the Secretary of State in the United States, Marco Rubio, who, as you just saw, takes the issue very, very seriously. So it's a very sad state of affairs when a senior politician, as in the case of Penny Wong in Australia, can dismiss an issue that, of course, everyone watching this takes seriously, but yet there is still a very large majority of the population that think it's a matter of ridicule, and I totally agree with Marco Rubio, who says that it's a serious national security issue and that one needs to get beyond the ridicule that afflicts this particular topic. Okay, so here is an article that was written, co-authored by Jeff Cruikshank, another Australian UFO researcher, Rear Admiral Tim Gallaudet, and who served with the US Navy, and Karen Gallaudet, who was a diver with the US Navy. And it concerns documentation that shows that there was a secret salvage operation of an aircraft carrier-sized cigar-shaped UFO that was brought down during a nuclear weapons test in 1962 called Blue Gill Triple Prime. So that's I mean, that's really kind of like quite shocking when you think about it. An aircraft carrier-sized UFO was brought down, and it sank to the bottom of the ocean, and they brought divers in, and the article discusses one of the divers actually getting to the craft, making it there, and putting his hand on the side of the craft, and his hand going inside, as though the craft was kind of like responsive. I mean, that in some way the hull of the craft could move or reposition itself in some way as people put hands on. And it reminded me of something that David Adair described when he went to Area 51 in 1971 and saw a ancient extraterrestrial spacecraft engine, very large engine, that used some kind of nuclear fusion that he had developed for his own kind of like model rockets, or actually prototype rockets, it was more correct. And so it seems that something like this happened in 1962. This craft crashed. And interestingly, when the Navy sent a follow-up salvage operation there to find the craft and to explore it or bring it up, it was gone. So this is something well worth taking a look at. Again, the article, you can find that by going to the link in the description to this video. I now have links to all my tweets, so you'll see the link and you can read the article, and it really does go into detail into the documentation. It's a very scholarly article, lots of details, lots of documentation, but I think it's very important to demonstrate that you did have this aircraft carrier-sized UFO being brought down for a short period, and presumably it was able to repair itself after it crashed into the ocean. And I mean, who can imagine? I mean, that shows you the kind of level of technology extraterrestrials would have, that they could crash in an atmospheric test involving a nuclear weapon. They could crash into the ocean, go to the bottom of the ocean, and they're down there for some time, and then they're able to repair themselves and fly back out. So that's pretty interesting. So here's a video by Jake, who uses the name Astral Irma. Irma, that's a race of feline beings, and Jake describes his travels in the astral realm, where one can actually get a sense of what's going on, kind of like an out-of-body experience where one can see events and kind of monitor people and see what's happening in space. And so he does this and gets independent corroboration for some of the information that he finds coming from other sources claiming to be in contact with extraterrestrials. Now, he raises some, I thought, very important points in terms of this archetypal battle between Christianity and Satanism, that at least in the United States, people do believe that there's a battle between a kind of pedophile practicing transnational cartel of Satanists, and on the other hand, you have Christian patriots wanting to restore Christian values and so forth, and there's this kind of worldwide battle between them. And what Jake points out in his video, it's just a short video, goes for I think 5 minutes, and the link is in the tweet here so you can watch that, is that he essentially describes that both perpetuate the matrix control system insofar as they get us to give our power away to external forces. and instead we need to go within and connect with our own divinity. So this is Jake, and this is his channel Astral on YouTube, where he discusses that. Now, I thought this was a very important point, that this does happen with a lot of religions, a lot of kind of, especially when it comes to contactee information, that a lot of people want to direct our power away, in terms of, well, extraterrestrials can save us, or a savior can save us, or some powerful being can save us, when in fact, one needs to go within and connect with our own divinity. Now, I would say that as far as Christianity is concerned, that is actually what Jesus of Nazareth taught. And when you study texts such as the Gnostic texts, that were suppressed by the Catholic Church after the time of Christ, what one finds is that Jesus of Nazareth was all about people connecting with the light within, with the God within, and that was the true pathway to liberation. But after his crucifixion and death, and that his teaching was hijacked by the Cabal to make it look like he was talking all about worshipping this God Yahweh, and that was really what his message was, and that he was now the pathway to that God, to that external God. And as for Satan, Lucifer, I mean, the way I think he's described in literature, I think he is very much an extraterrestrial. He is the archetypal rebel who needs to dominate others through a super inflated ego that puts him at the apex of a dark hierarchy that seeks to capture and manipulate the energy stemming from every individual's inner divinity. And I think this is the kind of archetypal battle. You can go back to the Anunnaki and you find the same thing, the same dynamic between Enki and Enlil. You go to the Manichaean texts, you find the same kind of battle. So this is, I think it is correct that there is this archetypal battle going on between powerful forces that people give their power away to, external forces, but that for true liberation, we need to go within. So, yeah, it's a point that is always worth re-emphasizing. Okay, so here is some newly released JFK assassination documents showing a tenuous connection between a CIA officer, George Ioannidis, and that he specialized in psychological warfare, and that he was connected to a group that was working with Lee Harvey Oswald, that Oswald was a member of that group. And so JFK conspiracy theorists are jumping on this, saying, well, this is very important because it finally shows that the CIA lied and covered up the connection between Ioannidis and Oswald, and that shows that there was a link between Oswald and the CIA. And certainly, there are those that are making that connection. But I think what's most significant here is that this CIA officer was involved in psychological warfare, and that he was connected to Oswald and the assassination. Now, psychological warfare, actually, that was the official cover for running classified UFO operations under the leadership of the Majestic 12 Special Studies Group. On June 28 of 1961, JFK sent a memo to CIA Director Alan Dulles requesting a, quote, review of MJ-12 intelligence operations as they relate to Cold War psychological warfare plans, end quote. So JFK had learned that classified UFO projects were hidden in psychological warfare operations and framed his request for classified UFO files accordingly. And when JFK made that request to the director of the CIA in 1961, Alan Dulles, Dulles stonewalled him and began a process that resulted in MJ-12 issuing 8 directives, one of which cryptically authorized JFK's assassination if he threatened the operations of MJ-12. And that assassination directive is called Project Environment. And it said, and I'm paraphrasing here, it said, when the conditions are not conducive for MJ-12 operations, it must be wet. And wet is the code word for assassination. And so what it was saying in a cryptic way, because secretaries had to type this up, so they didn't want the secretaries figuring out what was going on. So they basically issued a directive for the assassination of a sitting president if he made the conditions for the growth of MJ-12 undesirable. Now, there's, I already mentioned Australian UFO researcher Jeff Cruikshank, who found a diary confirming that on June 28, 1961, that Dulles did indeed visit Kennedy twice that day. And that's the very day that this leaked memo emerged. And the important thing here is that this was a leaked official memo, and has not been acknowledged by the CIA to be legitimate. So this was actually very important that Cruikshank was able to corroborate that Dulles did go to see Kennedy twice that day on June 28th. So that means that memo was issued as a result of Kennedy meeting with Dulles and kind of like asking, well, how do I get my hands on the UFO files? And Dulles saying, well, you got to send me an official memo asking for access to psychological warfare programs or something to that effect. And that's what Kennedy did. And Dulles came back a second time to collect that memo, and then, of course, stonewalled him. So what this all tells us is that given that this CIA officer, George Ioannidis, was connected to Lee Harvey Oswald, and his specialty was psychological warfare, it tells us that Ioannidis was familiar with classified UFO projects and MJ-12, and that he was probably involved in the implementation of the MJ-12 assassination directive and manipulated Oswald into becoming the patsy for the FJ-12 murder of JFK. So very significant document. Certainly not a smoking gun. I don't think you're going to get any smoking gun documents coming out of the CIA. They're going to be pretty much just covered. Those documents that are most incriminating have probably been destroyed already. Okay, so here is something from Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower. And so she wrote a tweet saying that the planetary grid has been overlaid with false memory architecture for thousands of years, false timelines, cloned archetypes, and hijacked sacred texts. Many star seasons and humans still carry fragments of Anunnaki-coded DNA, especially from Enki's engineered templates. This creates an unconscious resonance or loyalty to the very beings who tampered with their divine inheritance. It's not their fault. It's the result of deep genetic and karmic manipulation. So here she's referring to the Sumerian texts that point to Enki genetically engineering humanity with the approval of the Anunnaki assembly. That the assembly of the Anunnaki said, yes, Enki can go ahead and do this because the Anunnaki wanted a worker race. So now this is where Laura gets into areas that are very kind of like, pretty controversial, because some worship Enki as a kind of like the father of humanity. But Enki is the archetype of false light disguised as wisdom, according to Laura. He offers upgrades, sacred geometry, and spiritual technology that mimic truth. But it's a mimicry. He was a master at implanting synthetic systems that feel empowering but ultimately divert people from the organic path of full soul-sourced embodiment. Much of the spiritual community has been conditioned to seek answers externally from tablets, channels, benevolent federations, or seductive myths. But without the Sophianic heart connection, discernment is fractured. They follow charisma over coherence, information over inner gnosis. Now, this I think is very important, and it goes back to what I was talking about earlier with Jake or Astral Irma, that in a way we've been genetically hardwired to give our power away to these external forces, whether we're talking about a god, an extraterrestrial, that we seem to be hardwired to do this, and that what really is important is to make that connection of going within, connecting with one's soul, higher self, the infinity point. Laura calls it the Sophianic heart connection, and explains how we often, as humans, get fooled by people who have lots of charisma, lots of information to share, when we really need to look beyond that and make that internal connection. Now she goes on and she shares more info about Ea or Enki and how historical texts confirm his involvement in battles against the defeat of Tiamat, the embodiment of the mother goddess in pre-Anunnaki times, and replaced her with a patriarchal system with the Anunnaki at the apex of global authority. Now, this is actually historically very accurate. I remember reading the work of Joseph Campbell, who has written about world mythologies extensively, and he described a time when the world religions were dominated by these matriarchal mother goddess systems, that people worshipped the mother and worshipped the planet and the goddess. But then at a certain point, what happened was that these male sky gods arrived and they defeated the mother goddess traditions, the warriors that fought on behalf of the mother goddess, and they installed a patriarchal system with a male god at the top, Anu, and then you had his sons, Enki and Enlil. And this is actually confirmed in the oldest of the Sumerian texts, the Enuma Elish, where it describes how Enki, or Ea, and his son Marduk actually were the ones that were most responsible for challenging Tiamat and Apsu, also the primordial god or consort of Tiamat, and her chief, her general, Kingu, and that there was a great battle, and the forces of Tiamat, who were kind of like these monstrous forces, they were defeated, and the kind of like godly, divine Anunnaki took over power, and they then established humanity and so forth. And of course, the victors get to write the history. And so the Enuma Elish confirms what Joseph Campbell wrote, that you did have at one point these matriarchal religions that worship the mother goddess, but that these were displaced by these fierce, warlike sky gods who introduced a patriarchal system, and we still live in that now. So yeah, I thought that was some very important points, and and this raises the question: how does humanity deal with the return of Ea or Enki? He is someone that the Anunnaki, one of the Anunnaki princes, most responsible for creating the current system in which we live in. Is this something we want to welcome, or is this something that we need to be very careful of? And I think it kind of ultimately comes down to this question about, well, was he the master geneticist who bioengineered humanity? Like in that sense, his supporters say that he is the father of humanity, or at least the father of the avatar bodies, not the father of the inhabiting spirit, but of the avatar bodies. Or did he dumb down humanity? Did he actually not upgrade the human avatar from primitive hominids, but dumb down humans from a 12-strand DNA, kind of like close to perfect human, which kind of recognized the mother goddess and connected with that, which is what Laura Eisenhower is claiming, and dumbed them down so that they would become 2-strand slaves of the Anunnaki. So very important points, and it's quite relevant today because many sources have pointed to Enki having returned. And talking about returns to our solar system, here's information about a interstellar object called 3I Atlas, which has been estimated to be as big as 12 miles in length, and it'll pass close to Mars but miss the Earth by 2 astronomical units. Okay, so here we have this image of the pathway of this interstellar comet as it enters into our solar system. And what is shown is that it passes very close to Mars, and it misses Earth by quite a bit. So here's the diagram. This shows you the pathway of 3I Atlas. You can see it a little bit earlier on. Here we have Mars down the bottom here, and we have 3I Atlas passing by, and then as it progresses on its journey, it misses the Earth by at least 2 astronomical units. So it's not getting close to the Earth. But nevertheless, this is something that has got astronomers very interested because it is the 3rd interstellar object that astronomers officially recognized as having entered into our solar system and is passing through. Now, the first interstellar object was called Oumuamua because it was discovered in Hawaii, so it was given a Hawaiian name, which means advanced scout craft. Oumuamua. That's very interesting choice of name. And Professor Loeb thought that it was a derelict spacecraft. Others actually claimed that, actually confirmed that it was a derelict spacecraft. And that actually includes JP, who did send me information at the time about Oumuamua that I didn't release at the time. I held on to that. But definitely he was told about a mission to Oumuamua where people went inside. And so what JP is saying is that this new object, 3I Atlas, is having an effect on the space arcs. It is activating the space arcs. And I just did an update this week with JP, which I'm sure many of you have already seen now, where the Atlantic space arc has risen out of the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and is now floating in the upper atmosphere. And according to JP, it began to do that because this object, 3I Atlas, was sending a signal, and that signal was received by the Antarctica space arc, and that the Atlantic space arc also got that signal. So I'm not sure I can't recall if JP was saying the Atlantic space arc was directly triggered by this object, or whether it was triggered because the Antarctica space arc was activated by this object. But in either way, this object, 3I Atlas, is affecting the space arcs and activating them. So that's very interesting. And some are speculating that this could be the way in which the deep state orchestrate their kind of like false flag alien event, or like a salvation event. So we'll see how this plays out. All right, so here is where we get into this information concerning UFO whistleblowers being threatened or killed if they go public. So what I want to do is play this video clip from Ross Coulthart where he talks about this. So let's just listen to this short extract.
I'm talking to people in the Legacy program who have been in the room when senior members inside the Legacy program are telling them that they will be killed if they speak out about the program. There are threats being made to people to keep this secret. I'm talking to people.
Well, there you go. So senior whistleblowers are being threatened into silence that they will be killed. So this explains quite a few things. It explains why David Grush, for example, has not come forward to share more details of what he knows, and has really just confined himself to going into SCIFs, that's sensitive compartmented information facilities, to give briefings to members of Congress. That's pretty much all he's done now. We haven't had any more public interviews or anything. He talked about 40 other whistleblowers. Michael Schellenberger has talked about 30 other whistleblowers. And these whistleblowers are not coming forward, or if they are coming forward and sharing some information with with members of Congress or with the Arrow office, they're not going public because and we now can see from what Ross Coulthart has been told, it's because they're being threatened with death if they do go public. And people ask why JP, who I've been working with since 2008, continues to wear a mask and hide his identity. It's because these threats are real. The people, the deep state, they have red lines, and I've said before, they can be quite ruthless if you cross their red lines, and so they're definitely. The deep state is taking action to shut the whistleblowers down, and this is why the UFO disclosure process has pretty much come to a standstill. And you might remember about a month ago, I did an interview and covered some information from a Dr. Andrea Martin, who said that the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Earth Alliance have reached an agreement. And that agreement was that official disclosure would not happen. And so this is yet more evidence that is precisely what is happening now. But that the Earth Alliance and the Galactic Federation are continuing to work together in creating a Star Trek future, but that we, at the moment, as far as the general public are concerned, we're not going to get access to that advanced tech for some time yet, for some years yet. All right, here is JP released a photo he took of a craft coming down in the backyard of his home. He says he communicated with it, and I believe that there's I think there's another image of this. Here we go. Yeah, so that's how it looks when you add lighting to it. So that's the original photo, and when you add lighting to it, it's this very large triangle craft that came into his backyard. Now, I've been to JP's home and I've seen his backyard, and so this is quite a good size. We're probably talking 10 meters or 30 feet. And there it is. I mean, this is pretty impressive photographic evidence. Now, JP says that he took this a year ago and didn't release it because he was scared, because it was a bit too clear. Let's just say he didn't release it, but he chose to release it now because he feels that he's been given the green light to move forward. And I think this is part of the dynamic between the black hats and the white hats. As I mentioned, the black hats have pretty much stopped whistleblowers from coming forward to go to official congressional hearings or to go public to credentialed journalists to share their stories, thereby putting official disclosure, kind of like stopping that. But on the other hand, that gives the white hats the opportunity to release more information from people who are outside of the kind of like official policy circles. So someone like JP is not part of that, David Grush and Michael Schellenberger, Louis Elizondo, kind of Matthew Brown, Jake Barber, that group of whistleblowers that have been embraced by a lot of kind of mainstream UFO researchers. JP is outside of that group because the information he shares is kind of like, considered even by people that are pro UFO disclosure. They consider the information JP puts out, and of course yours truly, as kind of like fringe stuff. But this fringe stuff, this kind of grassroots disclosure stuff, at a time when official disclosure gets kind of shut down, you can have more of this because there's a dynamic, and so the white hats kind of like give the go-ahead to like release more information, and extraterrestrials continue to have face-to-face contact with people, and JP's having experiences with off-world extraterrestrials, and here you have a triangle-shaped craft, which is probably a government craft. So, it really is a dynamic between the white hats and the black hats. So we can expect more and more good quality photos and videos coming forward. And I think that's important, that if people are genuinely contactees, they're going to have some evidence. They need to have evidence and photos of the craft, of the craft that they're seeing or being taken on. That's compelling evidence. All right, well, what I want to talk about now is this Bob Lazar documentary that is coming out shortly. Now, Lazar is someone that occupies a special place in UFO history, as he and John Lear put Area 51, the S4 facility, and secret reverse engineering attempts on the radar of all UFO researchers. Now, what Bob Lazar experienced at Area 51 and the S4 facility is well known. He described seeing 9 spacecraft in there, and he just described them all as kind of like flying saucer craft. And what we do know from other whistleblowers is that the S4 facility is in fact a museum, that it's not really where the advanced reverse engineering is taking place at all, that Bob Lazar was kind of like tricked into thinking that it was. And it's a museum, and it's got 5 of the 9 craft are extraterrestrial that were recovered during crash retrieval operations, but 4 were Nazi flying saucer craft that were brought over during the end of World War II. And that was in Operation Lofty, which was the US Army Air Force's top secret operation to bring advanced Nazi aerospace vehicles to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for secret study. And that's what happened. And in the mid-1950s, after the Air Force had studied these Nazi craft for about 10 years, learned everything they needed to, they gave them to the CIA because the CIA is really in charge of Area 51 that runs the security. Well, the CIA with the Navy. I mean, there is a collaboration between the two there. Now, what's very interesting here is that we know from the testimony of Dr. Hal Puthoff, Clifford Stone, and others that there have been more than 10 UFO crash retrieval operations in the US and a similar number around the world. So if you got 5 of these craft being extraterrestrial, and more than 10 have been recovered in the United States alone, and then more than 10 from around the world, and some of those have been brought to the United States, then clearly the S4 facility is not where they're all taken and stored. So this is where we need to understand that Bob Lazar, referring to the S4 facility as where the reverse engineering is secretly happening and that it was unsuccessful, that in fact is not where the serious reverse engineering efforts are underway, that these are underway at locations where legacy aerospace corporations are operating. You'll notice that with Lazar's account of him working on the flying saucer craft, he didn't describe any legacy aerospace company being involved in that, because it was really, I think, just a kind of like a psychological operation to get him, to introduce him to some of this technology so that he would then disclose it, because I think Lazar was part of a disclosure, an initiative that involved scientists such as Dr. Edward Teller, who was the one that got Lazar the job at Area 51 and at the S4 facility. Now, the S4 facility is not where the legacy aerospace reverse engineering programs are happening. That they're happening in at least 2 other locations that I'm aware of. One is the S2 facility, which is near the S4 facility there at Papoose Lake at Area 51. And the other facility is, and this is the one that I think is probably the larger of the facilities, is Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah. And so I think this was why Bob Lazar was kind of chosen to work at the S4 facility, that he would just see everything that was happening there, and that his personality was such, and that because of his friendship with Leah, that he would eventually go public. And that's exactly what happened. And so I think Bob Lazar is part, or has been part of, a disclosure initiative since 1989 to kind of like open the door to what's really going on. And I think his information is very, very significant. I think there's more to it than everything he saw, but I think nevertheless, he saw enough to really kind of get the ball rolling on what really has been happening. Okay, so here's here's Ross Coulthart, the Australian journalist again, who talks about what has been happening, or what was going on with the Tic Tac craft in terms of it being something that belonged, or that was built by Lockheed Martin. So I just want to play a short segment from this, from his Need to Know podcast, where he talks a little bit about this Tic Tac craft being built by Lockheed.
Why would they lie about this? The only reason I can think that they're lying about this is because they're trying to conceal the level of incompetence that has allowed the United States, after the expenditure of trillions of dollars on its national security budget, to develop a strategic disadvantage with its potential enemies. That's
based on what you just said, we should assume then a Manhattan Project style endeavor is ongoing right now to try to catch up. Do you hear anything about that?
Well, part of the problem that I'm hearing from people in the program is that effort isn't happening. and that they're seeing the Chinese particularly developing advances that are far beyond what we're capable of. There is, in fact, a frustration that a large part of this program has been egregiously underfunded, and that a lot of what has been developed has been kept secret by the private aerospace companies that control it. I'm going to leave you with one thought today, Bryce. I now know categorically that the Tic Tac is Lockheed Martin technology.
Okay.
Okay, so that's important. I mean, that was something I was told a few years ago by a whistleblower who had unfortunately had to retract his testimony. So this was a whistleblower who was someone that was involved in security studies with the US Air Force, a former US Air Force serviceman. His name escapes me at the moment, but he was the first one to talk about the Tic Tac being built by Lockheed Martin. But then at a certain point, he retracted his testimony and said it was all false. Now, I think he did that because he was pressured into doing that. But here you have Ross Coulthart saying that's exactly categorically the case, that the Tic Tac craft cited in 2004, videotaped and so forth, is in fact Lockheed Martin technology, and that is what I believe is the case as well. Now, I think Coulthart, however, is still uninformed about just how far the US reverse engineering has succeeded. He seems to be locked in to this kind of like Bob Lazar type worldview where, yeah, we've got our hands on some craft and there have been attempts to reverse engineer them, but those reverse engineering efforts have been really incompetent and inconsequential and haven't gotten us anywhere. And in the meantime, China and Russia have been making leaps and bounds, developments, advances in this field, and we're now at a strategic disadvantage when it comes to the reverse engineering of exotic propulsion systems. And Ross Coulthart is putting that information out. There are many other UFO researchers, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, David Grush, Michael Schellenberger, and many others that agree with this. Many others look at the information from Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson, Thomas Wilson, and Thomas Wilson was wanting to find out about a reverse engineering program at a aerospace company, and was also told that, well, there'd been very little progress that had been made. Now, contrast that with the information in my last 10 books. 10 books, that's a lot of books. Over a 10-year period, I've written 10 books, 7 in the Secret Space Program series, and 3 in my US Army Insider Mission series. Unfortunately, the first of my Secret Space Program books is no longer in print. There's reasons for that, but you can get it, I think, you can get it on the Mars Records, and you could also get it on my website for free, but only in PDF format. But it's no longer for sale. But so, yeah, I've written 10 books on secret space programs with lots of evidence that the US, far from being incompetent and lagging behind Russia and China when it comes to reverse engineering captured UFOs, is way ahead of the game, that they have built secret space programs, and Russia and China are playing catch up. And Russia is like playing second fiddle to the US when it comes to secret space programs, because that was why the Soviet Union collapsed, because they realized that they just couldn't keep pace with the United States secret space program. So that was why the Cold War ended. And China is playing catch up. they're trying to steal as much Western technology as possible, and the US and its major allies are keeping China out of the most advanced technology programs, which is why China is not a party to the International Space Station. All right, so let's move on. Oh, here's some humor. Okay, language alert for mums and kiddies. So if you've got young kiddies there, you better put earplugs in or something. So the language here is not the best, it's almost suitable. But here's some more humor for you.
Hey guys, Foot here. I'm out here at Joshua Tree doing some C5 with my main man, Dr. Stephen Greer, and we're searching for aliens. I'm psyched.
I dropped 3 fucking G's for this trip and haven't seen shit. Fuck.
Kumbaya, my lord. Kumbaya.
And then it stuck the probe up.
Oh, check it out. Someone dropped some flares. So pretty. I just got a DM from one of these hot as fuck campers. DC Muscle Wolf invited me back to her room with her friend Bijou. Fuck yeah. Hey guys, Foot here.
Okay, all right. So some humor for the start of the week. All right, so here is a interview I did with Jalila Star that came out on my different channels, Patreon, YouTube, and so forth, and it discusses alien medbeds, the pros and the cons for them, and she describes a vision that she was given in the late 1990s or early 2000s, I don't remember the exact date, of a extraterrestrial disclosure initiative where the extraterrestrials would arrive and would offer medbeds for cures, and when people, because so many people were sick, that people would just kind of like rush over themselves or rush over others to get access to these medbeds because they were so desperate, but that the medbeds would be part of an agenda to replace the human population or to control the human population. So kind of a very nefarious agenda that the extraterrestrials had, and that they were pretending to be humanity's saviors. So for those of you that may be aware, there is a video series that Gene Roddenberry inspired. I think it's called Earth, the Final Conflict. And it described these extraterrestrial saviors coming along and doing this, but really, even though on the surface they were helping humanity, behind the scenes they were really undermining humanity. And so this is where, in Jalila Star's view, the idea that official disclosure is going to be delayed a few more years is not such a bad thing. That even though many of us were disappointed by this announcement that Dr. Andrea Martin released when she talked about the Galactic Federation reaching agreements with the Earth Alliance to put official disclosure on the back burner and just go ahead with collaborating together secretly, that this was something that had an upside, which was that we would have more time to develop self-healing techniques. And I understand this is a big challenge. It's certainly a challenge for all of us who are recovering or in the midst of some kind of health crisis or dealing with disease of loved ones and so forth. How do you go about self-healing? Well, I've been put in that position now. You know, I'm having to explore various self-healing techniques and really kind of like pay attention to my mind and to the thoughts coming in, because these can be very damaging to any self-healing. That you got to discipline your mind to be able to put in the right information so you can self-heal. So I do believe it's possible. It's not easy. Self-healing is certainly not easy, but it's worth it. Totally worth it. And in any case, the Medbeds are not being made available anytime soon. So when they are made available, if you've been successful in self-healing, then you wouldn't need them. And I think that's ultimately, it's good to be in that position where you can say, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to get into one of those things. All right, so here is I thought a kind of very interesting size comparison of different space stations over the years. You can begin with the smallest of the space stations, the Soyuz craft, Salyut. These were Russian or Soviet Union spacecraft, Mir, and then you had Skylab, and then you had Tiangong, the Chinese space station, because the US would not allow China to share technologies, or the US wouldn't share its space technologies with China because they know the Chinese will just steal and reverse engineer any technologies they get their hands on from the West, and that all kind of like trademark or patent laws are ignored. And here you have the International Space Station and China's latest Tiangong, the Chinese space station. And you can see the International Space Station it's much, much larger. And this is a collaborative effort by all the major spacefaring nations except for China. Now, the thing here is that these are all unclassified space stations, and that was what I wanted to point out. These are the ones that have been publicly announced. We know that there are unclassified space stations that are much larger. The National Reconnaissance Office in the US has maintained at least one, probably two classified space stations that dwarfs the International Space Station since the 1970s. And I wrote a book called the US Air Force Secret Space Program, where I went into length about the secret space station built by the Air Force with the National Reconnaissance Office, and how the NRO used aborted manned orbiting laboratory modules built by Douglas Aircraft Company for constructing its secret space station. So the way they do this in the classified programs is they'll get a company like Douglas Aircraft to do all the preliminary work, and it's all kind of like publicly known. They get so much funding, and then at the end of it all, and they've done all the architectural designs, they've done proof of concept, and they've got working models and so forth. Then in order to maintain secrecy, what they do is they officially say, oh, we're going to cancel the program, and Douglas has lost the contract. But what happened was that they canceled the contract with Douglas and handed it over to Lockheed Martin. And so Lockheed Martin went ahead and built the NRO space stations based on the architectural designs and working models built initially by Douglas Aircraft, or at towards the end it was called McDonnell Douglas. That's the way they often do it. And we know that they built huge classified space stations because in 1985, in his presidential diaries, Ronald Reagan wrote that the US had the capacity to host 300 people in Earth orbit. None of the unclassified space stations can hold anywhere near that. So none of these, the International Space Station, I mean, that can hold maybe a dozen up maximum for a short period of time. But here you're talking about having 300 people in Earth orbit, and that's a much, much larger venture. And so that is the best evidence, I believe, that these classified space stations do exist, and they are huge, much, much bigger than the International Space Station. All right, so here is the recent news about the Epstein client list that now no longer exists after Attorney General Pam Bondi said in February that it was sitting on a desk and that it was ready for release. Now, why did the Trump administration do this? Well, why did they backtrack? I mean, clearly a deal has been struck, and I think that deal is that that the people who were named in the client list, and we're talking about political leaders, VIPs, that were being blackmailed by Epstein and his bosses because they were, put into these honeypot situations with very young people. You know what I mean? And they were put into these honeypot situations, and it was all filmed. Great way to blackmail politicians and promote them. I mean, so once you get a politician, a young, aspiring politician that goes to one of these parties and they get filmed in a honeypot situation, and they're told that it's all on film, but no problems. Just do what we say, and you'll get promoted, and they get promoted and eventually reach high office. And so that Epstein client list has a lot of these people are named in there. So why would they do this? Well, the Mossad was involved in the Epstein client list, and that's kind of pretty well known. Now, why would it be significant that the Mossad was running this kind of honeypot operation whereby politicians in the United States and elsewhere around the world would be set up in honeypot situations and therefore blackmailed? Why would the Mossad do that? Well, I believe that the Mossad was doing that because the Mossad know that the most advanced technologies and the true alpha game when it comes to national security was not nuclear weapons at all, but secret space technologies and everything concerning UFOs, extraterrestrial life, that this was much more significant than even nuclear weapons. And we have confirmation of that. In the early 1950s, Wilbert Smith, the Canadian, who was a senior bureaucrat in the Canadian Department of Transportation, he confirmed that the flying saucer issue is more highly classified than the hydrogen bomb. Think about that for a moment. The flying saucer issue, UFOs, extraterrestrial life, all the issues associated with those topics are more highly classified than thermonuclear weapons. The Mossad knew this, Israel's leaders knew this, and so this was how they worked with the CIA and the Vatican. The Vatican also has played historically a big role in the UFOs and extraterrestrial cover-up, and this is documented in the close relationship between the former head of the CIA's counterintelligence division, that was James Jesus Angleton, who ran it from, I think it was from about 1955 up until 1975, that he ran the CIA's counterintelligence division, and that's where the classified UFO files were all kept and guarded. And he had two other responsibilities, and two other desks that he looked after in addition to counterintelligence, and they were the Vatican and the Israeli desk, the Mossad. And so both the Vatican and the Mossad have been deeply involved in these issues. So I think that when it comes to the Epstein list and why it wasn't released, a deal was made, and this deal is reflective of what I've already said, from the Andrea Martin material, that the Galactic Federation and the Earth Alliance have decided that they're going to continue to collaborate and share technologies to build big space fleets so that they can go out and wage military operations in deep space against enemies such as the Greys from Orion or the Draco reptilians from Alpha Draconis. But in the meantime, official disclosure would not happen, because the prevailing power structures don't want it, because and they justify it and say that humanity isn't ready. But that really, what's the truth is that the major oil industries, the pharmaceutical companies, the banking industries, and the transport and the military-industrial complex, that they don't want to reveal all of this yet, because it would kind of cut deeply into their bottom line. All right, so here is something that I thought was very interesting. This was from Carb, who I believe he works with his mother, Judith Lynn, to release channeled information concerning the Galactic Federation or Taygetian extraterrestrials. And I do find some of his information to be very, let's just say, very revealing and quite compelling, some of it. And I agree with what he says here. It's becoming clear to everyone the plan isn't disclosure. You might not like the reasons, but there are reasons. Dark forces are protecting themselves. Light forces are protecting us. I totally agree with that. Our systems are corrupted beyond repair, and there's no single source people will accept as truth. Yep, very accurate. Full disclosure threatens those who have been manipulating us for thousands of years, and also destroys belief systems many are still holding on to as truth. Yeah, I agree with all of that. Some would say risking the destruction of society is acceptable to have the truth. But Pleiadians and Galactic Federation have a better way. So, this is where there are those who would say, well, damn it, let's just go ahead and reveal the truth, even though there are forces out there that say humanity isn't ready, but, we're ready, let's have the truth come out. And there would be chaos, according to the information from Cub and his mother. But he says Pleiadians and the Galactic Federation have a better way. There is no white hat plan to save the world. The plan is ascension, which upgrades us physically and consciously and separates us from the dark forces completely. Well, this is where I have to part company with him and say, yes, there is a white hat plan. And that white hat plan is called the Star Trek future. And the Star Trek future is exactly what the name suggests, that they are building a technologically advanced space fleet that would become Starfleet, that would propel humanity into this Star Trek future where one day it's revealed that there are extraterrestrial civilizations out there. But don't worry, we, the Space Force, US Space Command, the Earth Alliance, we have our own fleets of huge space carriers. And we are beginning a colonization effort of outer space. So we are looking for volunteers, and you can be part of the Star Trek future. That's their plan. That's how they plan to save the planet and take off kind of millions of people off planet and send them off to Mars, send them off to Ceres, send them off to Titan and other places where huge colonies are going to be built, and even send them to other solar systems where there are Earth-like planets for colonization. And so, I mean, that's the plan. So I think that is what is going on. All right, so here we have China announcing a International Deep Space Exploration Association that is inaugurating a new era in global space collaboration. So what China is doing is getting any companies that are interested in space collaboration, any think tanks that are working on space affairs, to kind of share their data with the Chinese, and that this would be something that would eventually kind of like challenge the US-led Artemis Accords. Now, the Artemis Accords have approximately 53 nations, major spacefaring nations, that have joined, whereas the Chinese-led International Lunar Research Station, that initiative has approximately 13 countries, and it's really not getting very far, because the bottom line is that the word is out that China steals your intellectual property. So why would you share your most advanced technologies? Why would any country or any think tank share their technologies with China? Because China has a track record of stealing that technology, ignoring international copyright and patent laws, and just ripping people off. So if you're a company, if you spent millions of dollars in doing all of the kind of initial research to come up with an advanced technology, you share that with China, then they will just get some of their companies to rip all that off. So and unfortunately that is the case, and that's why so few countries are joining China, whereas the US-led Artemis Accords, at least if you join that's going to respect international copyright and patent laws. Now, it's there's a story behind that as well, but I think this is China's answer. I don't think it will get very far. Okay, so here is an article by Liberation Times, Christopher Sharp, who gives more details about an unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation that tracks UFO, UAP sightings. And Sharp analyzes the report written by the whistleblower Matthew Brown that was submitted to the Congressional Record by Michael Schellenberger in 2024 in the House Oversight Subcommittee hearing. Now, the interesting thing about this article by Christopher Sharp in writing for the Liberation Times is that the Immaculate Constellation Special Access Program was much more than merely being the successor to the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that was informally run by Luis Elizondo in the Pentagon to track UFO sightings near military facilities and exercises. So that was described as a kind of behind-the-scenes effort by a number of Pentagon insiders to track UFO sightings, and that it was headed informally by Luis Elizondo up until 2017 when he left because apparently he wasn't taken. The Pentagon wasn't taking UFO issues seriously. Not surprised, because that was truly a kind of very low-level surveillance or monitoring program. But the real program was Immaculate Constellation, that was performing the vital national security task of distinguishing between extraterrestrial spacecraft, or UAPs, and alien reproduction vehicles, or RVs. Sharp wrote, according to the report, US military intelligence can distinguish between UAP and RVs. So what is exactly going on here? Well, what I wanted to point to was that Linda Moulton Howe, she interviewed a whistleblower called Stein or Cooper, and even Anonymous, and said that in the 1950s, one of his assignments was to track and distinguish between Nazi flying saucers and extraterrestrial UFOs in South America and Antarctica. So that was a very highly classified program. from the 1950s. And so that tells us that Immaculate Constellation and its predecessors has been running for over 70 years. And that was a very serious national security effort to distinguish between UFOs that belong to extraterrestrials and UFOs that belong to a foreign power, such as the Nazi Dark Fleet in the Americas, Antarctica, or more recently, the Russian secret space program or the Chinese secret space program. So that program is in existence. And then this is where Sharp falls into that same mindset that I was criticizing earlier, that Ross Coulthart and George Knapp and Jerry McCorvell and David Grush and others have, which is that they all buy into this narrative, which is a misleading narrative at best, if not false outright, that foreign powers such as China and Russia are ahead of the US when it comes to reverse engineering or reverse engineered vehicles. So the UAP issue has tremendous national security importance. So this is where as I pointed out earlier, that there is a kind of lack of awareness on the part of many mainstream UFO researchers that just will buy into this narrative that the US is behind the Russians and the Chinese when it comes to reverse engineering UFO craft, which especially those that crash and involve non-human intelligence, that Russia and China are ahead, and that a lot of these UFOs and drones and orbs that are being seen actually belong to Russia and China. And I think a lot of that is false. So, but I think it's great that we have someone like Matthew Brown confirming the existence of Immaculate Constellation and its true role in tracking and distinguishing between alien spacecraft and corporate-built alien reproduction vehicles that date all the way back to the 1950s. But as I said, the narrative that the US is behind China and Russia is false. Okay, so here is a short video by JP, who shares his thoughts about some UFO photos and video he took in 2017 while a civilian living near MacDill Air Force Base. I did a story on JP's photos that was published on September 1st, 2017, which was the first time the public had heard of him. So on JP's YouTube channel, here's where he kind of like shares some of the information concerning some of these UFO craft that he sent photos of in 2017. So he discusses the craft, how it was, he sent a series of 6 craft here and how it was powering up. And, this was compelling photographic evidence. Here's another incident where he was told to look up and he saw a flying triangle craft. So he was being helped by covert operatives to take photographs of these craft. So this video goes for about 22 minutes. I'm not going to play it now, but you just go to JP's channel. The link is in the description to get more of that. Or if you wanted to see the original article I wrote about this, you can go to my website and go to the page I created for JP, which is it's under witnesses. If you see the top menu, just go to witnesses and you'll see JP articles, photos, and so forth. So definitely worth taking a look at that. Okay, so JP did a new update where he talks about the Atlantic space arc rising And this was released first on Patreon. So shout out to all my Patreon subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. Your $7 a month really does help me and the channel. We put out 3 free videos every week, and $7 a month. That translates to about 60 cents per episode, which is great value. So if you haven't subscribed to Patreon, that's a great way of supporting this channel. So on the latest update by JP, so this is update number 48 now, he talks about going to a briefing where he was told that the Atlantic space arc had risen from the ocean floor into the atmosphere, and that it was hovering up there, that it was using some kind of stealth technology which would make it look like a cloud. So if you're in the area, it would probably look like a lenticular cloud, but it was floating up there in the atmosphere. He said it was under the control of Nordic extraterrestrials, and that it appeared to be responding to some signal coming from Antarctica and from this object, 3I Atlas, that it's just entered our solar system. So as I said, this is a significant development. Exactly what it means, we don't know. Could this be the beginning of an alien salvation event? JP has talked about that in the past. Others have talked about that. Andrea Martin has talked about that. Quite a few have talked about the possibility of an alien salvation event. Does it mean it's going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. There's risks for the deep state in trying to pull it, trying to do something like that, but they may try. So we'll see. All right, and so here is my second last story. And this concerns the recent claim by Gosha, who is a Spain-based researcher of Polish origin, who in 2018 set up a YouTube channel called Cosmic Agency, where she and a Spanish researcher by the name of Robert began working with an extraterrestrial called Swaru that was communicating through the internet. And they have various reasons for thinking it is accurate information, genuine information. I have done some research on the origins of the Cosmic Agency and Gosha, and so far I found that the information was original and was very accurate. And so I think that this attempt by extraterrestrials from the Tagetan star system to communicate through the internet is not such a surprise, that this would be yet another example of extraterrestrials using modern communication technologies to communicate with humanity. This has happened before. In the 1960s, you had a extraterrestrial contactee by the name of Robert Renault, who was communicating with the Corendians, and he began communicating with them first via ham radio. And then later on, it evolved into full-blown physical contact. So that's how it began, with ham radio. And of course, Nikola Tesla and Guglielmo Marconi both have made claims that in the early 1900s, when radio was first developed, that they had begun communicating with Martians or extraterrestrials from another planet using the first radio devices. And then you have the Humo case that was also based in Spain in the 1960s and 70s, and that involved this group of extraterrestrials called Humites that was sending technical letters to scientists around the world to get them to be interested in the issue. Now, apparently, according to Gosha, there's been an infiltration and attempt to discredit the information coming from the Cosmic Agency website of Gosha and the equivalent from the Spanish website run by Robert. So this just confirms that, well, if you get a technology such as the internet, and that's one way for communications to happen, well, that technology can be hacked. And so that means all technologies can be hacked, even extraterrestrial ones. There are those that claim that because they have a physical or etheric implant that their information is accurate. Now, common sense, logic would tell us that that kind of technology couldn't also be hacked, and that person can be made to believe anything, because if the technology, if the implant is hacked, then their information can be compromised in some way. Now, the information coming from the Swaru official channel that was created several years after the Cosmic Agency channel and coming from other Tagetan sources, I can't say I really resonated with that. And the main reason I didn't resonate with that was because it used artificial voice. With Robert and Gosha, you have humans transmitting the information, so you can get to use your kind of intuition and internal senses to feel whether that information is accurate or not, whether the sources have been compromised in some way. But if the information is just coming through AI-produced voices, and you just have an avatar shown on the screen of some actress that is supposedly an extraterrestrial, that I think is very suspect. And ultimately, the way in which the Swaru official channel would say that they would begin their transmissions by saying that the information is for entertainment purposes only. And so when you hear that, it's like, well, if you are putting out the truth, I mean, would you like in somehow underscore or undermine your own work by saying that you're putting it out for entertainment purposes only? Why would you do that if you're putting out truthful information? So yeah, that's why I think that the Cosmic Agency information from Gosha is more likely to be accurate, as opposed to the Swaru official channel that I think is more likely to be compromised. Okay, so now this takes me to the final story, and that is that in 1 week's time will be my next monthly briefing. So that will be on July 19, and in that briefing I will be covering a lot of issues, some of which I've discussed today, such as the Atlantic Space Arc. What does that mean? The Epstein client list, what are the implications of that for disclosure, and many other issues that are really of great importance to us today. The Galactic Envoy program, I'll be talking about that as well, because now there are more envoys coming forward, and they all have very important information to share. And next week I'll be sharing a first-hand account from another Galactic Envoy, Erica Amorina. So that'll be coming out next Thursday. And so you'll get early access on Patreon, or you can watch that on YouTube next Thursday. So that's it for the week in review for Saturday, July 12. I look forward to seeing you next week and to my next monthly briefing. And if you're interested in the monthly briefing, you can join either by going to Patreon and becoming a tier 2, that's a solar patron, or you can go directly to the Crowdcast link that's provided in the description, and you can join directly there without being a Patreon member. So thank you for watching, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Sala. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.